Hello everyone, it is December, the weather is teasing being below freezing, and that means it is time to finally start listening to some wintry music. I have made seasonal music recommendations now for spring, summer, autumn, and we're finishing out the series with winter, which to me I actually feel like has like the most concrete vibe. Especially because for me, winter albums really do fit into like one of the like three main winter months. I know winter doesn't start till like the end of December, but to me, winter is December, January, February, so you're just gonna have to deal with that. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you 15 music recommendations, 5 for December, 5 for January, 5 for February, that are just perfect for cold, snowy, dark time listening. Up first, we have Purple Mountains by Purple Mountains. This is an indie rock, alt-country singer-songwriter album that was released by David Berman in 2019, a month before he committed suicide. This is a very dark and difficult album, thematically, and especially knowing that we know that Berman died and killed himself. But the interesting thing about this, the reason I think it like works for December, is that like it still does have like a lot of life to it. A lot of the songs are almost, I would say, dancey, so I feel like it's its album that like is darkness but shrouded in life, which I feel like kind of is December-y because, you know, like it's cold, it's dark, everyone's kind of depressed, but also everyone's very happy because like you have all the Christmas lights or whatever. So I just feel like this gets like those cold, dark December vibes right. I forgot to mention this, but David Berman was the frontman lyricist for Silver Jews, and I feel like his lyrics on this are just like him in peak form. I do really love, again, like there's so much energy to these songs, which makes them even darker. But like Margaritas at the Mall, which sounds like a fun song. I just love the contrast between the sound and the meaning, and I think it just creates this like absolutely unique and beautiful indie rock album, maybe like my favorite indie rock album of the last 10 years. Next we have Contemporary Movement by Duster. So Stratosphere by Duster I think is an album that some people associate with winter. To me that is like the summariest album of all time. It is hazy, it is warm, it is sticky, and Contemporary Movement is like the winter to Stratosphere's summer. This is a lo-fi slowcore album that to me really feels like you're like trapped in like a dusting of snow. It is very, very slow, which I feel like is right for winter, right for the cold. I think it is like perfect for kind of like sad winter nights. I feel like the color of the album, that like specific blue, is something that also really evokes winter for me. Duster really gets like a very spacey sound, and the melodies on this are just like dreamy and spacey and dark and so slow. Like, just great for like a contemplative winter December evening. Next we have an album that I heard recently, and took me completely by surprise, and that is 808s and Heartbreak by Kanye West. I think like the songs on this are what I was most familiar with when I was younger. Like I'd heard Heartless and Love Lockdown, and like when I was younger I was not into any kind of rap or hip hop, so I was like, hate that stuff. And now like finally hearing this album fully for the first time as an adult, it just like completely blew me away. This is an electropop pop rap album that like is wintry and knows it. There's this song on it called Coldest Winter, which is my favorite song on that album, and it like feels like being trapped in an ice storm. It's like very intense, and I feel like the electronicness, why do I think electronic elements equate snow and ice? What's that about? Not all electronic music is wintry, but I feel like the specific way this hits just feels like ice, just like feels like snowflakes. And I feel like I love this as a part of Kanye's discography. You know, like I'm more of an early Kanye type person. Like Late Registration is my favorite album of his, then followed by The College Dropout, and I just feel like this does that like heavy electronic thing just like so well. If you've ever been skeptical about listening to this album because again you have like negative connotations from when you were young and it was just like on the radio all the time, really check this out because like this is an amazing stuck in like specifically ice. If it's like hailing, which isn't that a summer thing? I don't know. If it's like icy out, I feel like this is the album for you. Then we have, and I might pronounce this incorrectly, Bergtatt by Ulver. This is an atmospheric black metal, pagan black metal album, and I feel like black metal is generally good for like late autumn and all of winter, and this is specifically maybe my favorite black metal album ever. So all those like atmospheric black metal groups are weird. Ulver and Burzum, they were like doing murder up, down, left, and right, but like musically Ulver is an especially weird group because I know they like transitioned from black metal to folk, and I actually feel like those more folksy elements on this album are what make it so great for winter. It kind of feels like the trees, but the barren trees all over the place. Black metal is something that is generally still a little bit inaccessible for me, and I feel like atmospheric black metal, it has been somewhat of a nice transition into it, because I listen to a lot of ambient music, and I feel like this is kind of like a, you know, there are harsh vocals, but like it's less about like vocal melodies, which I think is kind of my block with black metal, and more about just like the atmosphere of the music. So this is just like a great one for like a dark, stormy December day. My final one in this group is probably going to be controversial because I know like the whole world associates this with autumn, and that is All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. My partner has always posited that this was a Christmas album, and I finally heard it for the first time this month, and not only do I agree, but I've been like completely obsessed with this album ever since. So this is a pop rock singer-songwriter album by George Harrison, who is a Beatle. In my opinion, this is like my favorite album ever made by a Beatle. Like, I like it better than any individual Beatles album anyways. And to me, this just feels like watching your town like put on the Christmas lights, or like you play this while like you're putting up a Christmas tree. Also, my family was Jewish. I've celebrated like 2 Christmases in my entire life, so like this is just like the vibes I have on like association, like I've osmosed through the culture. But I think because this album is so religious is what gives it like a very Christmassy vibe for me. Like My Sweet Lord, just like, that's a Christmas song. Like, no offense, that is a Christmas song toe to tip. And I feel like this just gives both like, you know, like cozy cold vibes. That's what this album gives me. So I feel like this is like a perfect album for Christmas week. I will be listening to it on Christmas. Oh, which is, by the way, my birthday. We're getting not personal, but like my birthday's on Christmas, so like I just have like a very weird relationship with Christmas, but I will probably be listening to this on my birthday because it's wonderful and I like those Christmassy vibes. 2 honorable mentions for this month I want to say. One is Blue by Joni Mitchell, which the whole album could work, but like River especially is a Christmas song. And 2, The Nutcracker Suite. I have listened to The Nutcracker Suite more than any other album in my entire life because I listen to it when I'm writing, either like academic papers in college or now that like I do editing and I write editorial assessments. It's just like a very good piece of music for me to write to, and obviously that is so Christmassy, and I love it. I love the Nutcracker, like, just so much. Now moving on to January, and while December I view in my head as like a very like dark end of the year month because it's the end of the year, January to me feels like possibility. I like, if it had like a color, the color of January is white. It's like snow covered and open and like ready for the new year. So the first one I have is actually the album I associate most with winter. I literally only listen to it in the winter, and that is Music for People in Trouble by Susanne Sundfør, which is like the most gorgeous art pop singer-songwriter album in the entire world. Her voice is so unbelievably ethereal. This is art pop that feels like you're in a cathedral being sung to by angels. I once described this album as like lush nihilism because the lyrics are very bleak, but the orchestrations are gorgeous, and again, like, there's a certain openness to the music that like, it just feels like you're in some kind of cathedral and like you can hear the echo, and like it's just like, it's stunning. Yeah, I actually wrote in my notes that like it creates kind of like a sense of romanticism, like old Victorian romanticism. I'm probably getting like my dates and time periods here wrong, whatever. But like this also kind of feels like an icy wash of waves and would be perfect for one of those days when like the ground is covered in snow, so the whole sky just feels like white. It's just like, I cannot recommend this album enough. Next we have another one that I know people associate with autumn, but to me feels like a January album, and that is Seven Swans by Sufjan Stevens. This is a singer-songwriter indie folk chamber folk album that to me really feels like Sufjan at his folksiest. The banjo plays like a really heavy part in this album that to me kind of feels like the sparseness of the trees. I know a lot of people think of Sufjan as either like that like Carrie Lowell dreaminess or like the Illinois like grand orchestration, but this is like very stripped down and barren and folksy and religious too. This is just like Sufjan at his most traditional. It feels very soft, like a soft cold breeze breezing past. I just find that like I love the restrainedness of this album feels like the barrenness of January to me. And I actually haven't listened to this album in full for a little bit, so I'll probably break it out, you guessed it, in January. Next we have my favorite winter ambient album, and that is Haunt Me, Do It Again by Tim Hecker. This album evokes what it feels like right before the snowstorm. Like you can tell that the weather is changing, but it hasn't hit yet. In fact, like, I like albums, some of these albums, like, know they're winter albums. I think, like, the first 3 songs in this are called Music for Tundra, so, like, this is very well aware that it is evoking something very cold. Tim Hecker, I know, also dabbles in, like, more electronic ambient music, but this to me is, like, a very traditional ambient album that just, like, it just feels very wintry. I also haven't listened to this in quite a bit, but I remember the last time I listened to it, it like completely jumped up in like my ambient rankings in my brain. So I gotta listen to this again, and if you're looking for some wintry ambient music, this would be my recommendation. So the piano has always felt like a winter instrument to me, and probably the heaviest piano album in this video is Mark Hollis by Mark Hollis, who is the guy from Talk Talk, for those who don't know. So this is a singer-songwriter chamber jazz album. Some of the songs lean more on like the singer-songwriter element, you know, just like a man and a piano, and some of them lean more jazzy. And this particular blend of genres feels very wintry to me, and especially January, because again, it does feel very, very sparse. I wrote in my notes, great wording, this particular mix of jazz, post-rock, and piano ballady tracks just feels like the yearning of winter. I don't know what the fuck I meant by that, but like, I agree with it. This is also a very like cold, dark, sad album, which again feels like January. Not quite like the hope of January, but like when you're kind of like so far into winter and you want it to be over, that is what this album feels like to me. And my final one for January, which I have to admit was originally in December, so like this is kind of like a crossover event of the century, is Songs of Love and Hate by Leonard Cohen, which, whoo boy. First off, I know that like people associate like both of his 2 major albums, this and Songs of Leonard Cohen, with winter, especially because I know the film McCabe and Mrs. Miller uses a lot of songs from Songs of Leonard Cohen, but I have never seen that movie, and to me, Songs of Love and Hate is like the more wintry one. It is so desolate, dark, depressing, and cold. So this is a contemporary folk singer-songwriter album that is another one that like knows it's evoking winter. One of the best songs in this album is called Avalanche, that really feels like the rolling horror of an avalanche just like trapped inside of a folk song. I think the reason this ultimately falls into January for me is because it does again feel very sparse. Famous Blue Raincoat, which is my favorite Leonard Cohen song of all time, is just like a plea to life, and life refuses to answer. This is like a very painful, dark folk album. It's gorgeous all over the place, but definitely for like a January night, don't even think about listening to this during the day because it won't reach you. That's not true. You can listen to any music literally at any time, but like I would listen to this on a January evening and have a great and terrible time. And now finally we move on to February, which has definitely a different, distinct vibe. February is cold and wintry, but also because of Valentine's Day, you're in love and you're having sex. That is what February is for. So the most February album of all time is Vespterine by Bjork. This is an electronic art pop album that is like it's just like the sexiest winter album. That's what it is. It's the sexy winter album that's ever been created. As I wrote, like you're in an ice castle, but also you're having the most sensual sex of your life. There are icy vocals. Why did I write deedly instrumentals? Oh, like snowflakes and fractals, which is true. This is another album where like the electronic elements feel like snowflakes, feel very wintry, icy, fractal-esque, snowflake-esque, all of that good stuff. This is an album that I feel like is best consumed in its entirety. I love Vespterine, but almost always end up like skipping one of the songs when it comes up on shuffle, because like I only want to listen to Vespterine when I'm listening to the entire album. And again, this is just like, it's sensual, it's beautiful, it's complex, just like some of the best and especially the wintriest art pop ever created. Next we have Treasure by Cocteau Twins, which is a dream pop ethereal wave album that I feel like is like similarly sensual and wintry in ways. Elizabeth Fraser's vocals are so distinct, and again I feel like here they kind of evoke like the warmth while a snowstorm is happening. Like the snow is falling outside, and it's not a dangerous snow, the snow is just falling and you're sitting inside with like a warm cup of cocoa. This album feels like a hug, but still in a wintry way, in a way that, good God, Nicole, find the words. I think the way some of Cocteau Twins' music is wavy feels kind of warm and dense and hazy. Like I'm thinking of some of the stuff on Heaven or Las Vegas, but here, the way it waves and the way it's dreamy is just in like a very wintry, icy, almost sparse at times kind of way. It's just very beautiful, and if you've never heard this album, I cannot recommend it enough. Next we have Winks and Kisses by Airiel, which is actually a compilation of 4 EPs. This is a shoegaze dream pop compilation that really feels like being in love in the wintertime. For some reason this one's a little bit harder to explain because I feel like it has less of like the actual musical markers of being correct for this season. It doesn't necessarily feel snowy, but this is one song called In Your Room, which is like this 9-minute long shoegaze song, like one of the greatest shoegaze songs of all time, that just to me feels like the preeminent being in love in winter song. I think there's just something about the particular way in which Airiel's shoegaze is dreamy that again feels like that very like white skyness of a snow-covered day. Like, I can't imagine listening to this music while the world is green. It just doesn't feel right for that. I understand that these associations may mean nothing to any of you, but this one is a little bit harder for me to explain, but I do think this is some of the greatest and most underrated shoegaze out there. So if you're a shoegaze head and haven't heard of this, I really recommend it. Back on our sexy kick, we've got Pang by Caroline Polachek, which I hadn't even thought of until a friend mentioned this on Twitter as a great winter album, and I was like, you're right, you're dead on right, I need to listen to this again in February. This is an art pop, ambient pop album that again, like, might not be as like electronic as some of the other stuff, but like definitely is like heavily like synthesized and like even like auto-tuned at times that like feels very wintry to me. Yeah, this merges like traditional art ambient pop with more like electronic and like technological elements just like so brilliantly. I feel like the vocal performance is very warm but also very ethereal, which gives off a wintry vibe to me, and like kind of feels like you're like stuck in a cave, but not in a bad way. This album also I think has a lot to do with like love and kind of with like the discovery of the self, which is why I think it's a great beginning of the year album, and again, like there are certain songs in this that like feel kind of like sexy, which is why it's great for like a Valentine's Day kind of vibe. Caroline Polachek I feel like is just like one of the most exciting artists out there now also, and like this album just like blew me away when it came out and continues to rise in my personal ranks, so great February album. And my final one for this month has nothing to do with the rest of the stuff I've talked about in February. This is my second favorite winter album of all time, and that is Parentheses by Sigur Ros. Few things about this album. First off, I listened to it for the first time on like a February evening in college when like I think I like needed to hear it. It kind of like blew me away, kind of changed my life, so like, this is just like always gonna be a February album for me because of when I heard it. But that said, I think this is the perfect album for like the final scream of winter. This is a post-rock album that is so intense. It like, yeah, it feels like the final grasps of like that final cold month in either February or March before it turns back to warmth. I'm going to let my written words speak better because when I talk, I'm a bumbling idiot, but sometimes when I write, I have more of a brain cell than one. This feels like being on an Icelandic glacier, staring out into the nothingness, begging to the stars to give you answers, feeling all the anger in the world when they won't, and then a final release of resignation. So, I think this is the best post-rock album of all time. It doesn't succumb to just like crescendo core. I think because it has that like Icelandic flair, it feels very of the earth, of the ocean, of the ground, of just like, it feels very grounded in the horror and the beauty of our cold landscapes. And I will say that the final track, Untitled 8, the way it explodes in those last 5 minutes, I'm not sure any other music has ever moved me as much as that does. It's why it feels like this final grasp. You're like letting go of something. And like when spring arrives, I feel like that is a time when like you let go of a lot. So like I think to me this is why this feels like end of February, early March, like you're ready to let go of whatever you're holding on to. And I just think it's so beautiful. So those are my wintry music album recommendations. Please let me know what you like to listen to in winter, either like genres, artists, or albums, because I love checking out new shit, especially when it's seasonally appropriate. Thank you so much for watching. That is all I have for you today, and you will see me in the next one.